Fred Richani of TSC. In this interview, we celebrate the life and times of late great Phillies and White Sox legend Dick Allen, who finally goes into the Baseball Hall of Fame. We chat with his son Richard Allen Jr., as well as his biographers Dr. David Fletcher and John Owens. Richard Allen Jr., thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations to you and your family. The late, great, never forgotten Dick Allen is finally going into the Baseball Hall of Fame in the year 2025. Long overdue, but certainly better late than never. How are you and your family feeling?
Excited, very excited about this July and what it entails. It's a big sigh of relief. All the wondering and answering the questions. When do you think it's all over? We know now, so it's a good feeling. It really is.
I know you've done a lot of advocating, of course, but for your father with Dr. David Fletcher, along with writer John Owens, who wrote the fantastic biography on Dick Allen called Chili Dog MVP a few years ago. How much do you think that biography helped kind of push the agenda for Dick Allen to get in?
A lot, and then it really felt it touched on the person and him being a regular human being, and especially with the chili dog, eating a chili dog and having it ripped down his uniform. But as Dr. Fletcher mentioned, and as he referenced me when writing the book, he said it's also about what was going on in the city of Chicago at the time. So yeah, it helped. I mean, it took a village to get where we are now, and that definitely was a big part of it.
While Dick was still with us, did he lament about the Hall of Fame at all? Was it one of those things where he was like, it is what it is? Like, I'm sure it would have meant a lot to him, but was it something that he thought about regularly?
No, no, not at all. He was at peace with it. I told the story of, I think it was 93, the All-Star game was in Baltimore, and they recognized the Negro League players, and Ratcliffe double duties, yelled for him and signaled him over and said, "Hey," and my father said, "Yeah." He said, "You could have played with us." My father turned to me and he said, "You hear him?" I said, "Say it again." He said, "You could have played with us." And my father said, "That's all the Hall of Fame I need right there." So he was genuinely at peace with not going, but deep down, I think he would have really welcomed to see his name on that wall with that, you know, with the plaque on the wall. He really would have. I mean, who wouldn't? Honestly. I mean, that's the highest honor.
Yeah, for sure. And besides yourself and of course Mr. Owens and Dr. Fletcher and your family being super happy, another gentleman who was very happy was his longtime friend Goose Gossage, legendary player in his own right. Is Goose going to be at the Hall of Fame? And what can you tell us about some of the festivities coming up?
From what I'm hearing, Goose will be there. I spoke with him minutes after the induction. He he will be there. I really don't know all the details about the events, but from what I'm hearing, there's a lot going on, and I guess we'll be going different directions, and who knows, who knows what to expect. I really don't. I'm just excited for it to happen.
When did you realize how significant your father's impact to the game was?
When I'd have to say that 72 run, I really that was the impact, and the walk up music. Because I was old enough to y- remember him playing, and or how intimidating that the organ for with Nancy Faust with the walk up and hearing the cheers and the crowd. I knew he was an impact player at that time.
John Owens, thank you so much. You wrote, of course, the biography Chili Dog MVP with Dr. David Fletcher, critically acclaimed, rightfully so. Fantastic book. How much do you think that played a role into his Hall of Fame candidacy and him finally breaking through for 2025?
It's hard to say. I mean, it definitely created awareness for Dick, especially in this market where he wasn't necessarily forgotten, but you had to be a certain age to remember the accomplishments Dick had, specifically when he was with the White Sox. He was only with the White Sox for 3 years, but those were three extremely important years in franchise history. I mean, as we noted in the book, Dick played a huge role in probably saving the franchise from moving to another location like Milwaukee. So I know that I can't speak for how the whether or not it created awareness nationally, but definitely in Chicago, we heard a lot about from fans who remember him when they saw him play, and from fans who didn't have previous knowledge of Dick and were made more aware of him by the book.
Now, in terms of that it factor, so was the Dick that we saw on camera and interviews the same one that we saw off screen as well?
Oh yes, definitely, definitely. He didn't disguise himself. He's just a down to earth guy. No, no frills. He liked to laugh. He liked his Heineken, and he just an ordinary guy. What you saw on camera is what you saw off camera.
Fred, I met him in 2012. I met him when he was here for the 40th reunion of the 1972 White Sox team that he was the star on. And, I was struck, as Richard said, he was a very modest, humble man, but I was struck by and I was struck by the fact that he was so modest and humble, considering he was such a great five-tool player. And, the other thing that struck me was his sense of humor. I had heard his teammates talk about that sense of humor. He could be a jokester in the clubhouse, and would keep things loose. And you wouldn't necessarily think of him of that like that if you saw him playing a game, but behind closed doors or in private, he could be a very funny man.
What did you learn about your father after the fact? Obviously, he had a great career. You grew up with him. He raised a great family and everything. But in these last few years, really trying to make the final push to get him into the Hall of Fame, was there anything you learned about him as a person or as a player you didn't know before growing up?
That's a good question. I can't really think of anything that 'cause he rarely discussed a lot of baseball. He liked talking horses. He liked talking high school basketball. Not much so football, but I'm trying to think that the only thing that I think I started to learn, it might have been a little bit about Little Rock, Arkansas. But he sort of opened up a little bit and told me a little bit of things about it. But I learned that talking to someone that told me what actually was going on. What happened was I asked my father, "Did this happen and this or that happen?" And he asked me, "Where am I getting this information?" So the information that I was receiving, it had to be true, but he didn't want to relive it. He just told me his first 3 days there, what happened. So learning about that, I guess I felt he's a strong man to endure what he did in Little Rock. That would be the one thing I can say I learned back in his career.
The one thing I learned is that he was extremely an independent thinker. The baseball, has these rules that today, and they really had them back in the '60s and '70s when Dick played, and Dick it wouldn't necessarily he loved the game, but he wasn't one to he was a maverick. He marched to the beat of a different drummer. He wouldn't necessarily do things that other players did. And that struck me as, him being an independent thinker. For instance, probably the most the thing that's noted about Dick a lot is that he wouldn't necessarily take batting practice before a game, but he had specific reasons for not doing that. He wasn't seeing the same speed during batting practice that he'd see from a pitcher during game time. So it was useless to him. So he said, "Why should I do this if it's gonna hurt my overall game? I don't need it, and I can live without it, and I'll wait until the game starts and see what type of pitcher I'm facing." So that was something that no one else did in his time, and he was, very independent that way. So the thing I learned about him is that he was ahead of his time, an independent thinker. People like Marvin Miller, the head of the players union, appreciated him. He would negotiate his own contracts. I'm sure Richard probably has more information about how he dealt with ownership and management, but he definitely knew his own value. He was the highest paid player in baseball with the White Sox in 1972 because he knew, what his value was to a team and to baseball overall. So, I think, the thing that really impressed me about Dick and just reading about him and learning about him was that he had his own mindset on different aspects of life and about baseball.
I was speaking with Fred Clare years ago, and he said the father was with us with the Dodgers for 1 year. So to speak on his character, he told me something that was a very good assessment of my father. And Fred Clare, he said, "There's people that are happy with more, and your father was content with having less." And I thought that's him. It wasn't about more. He was content with what he had and where he was. It was just simplicity. That's like his day after he retired and was sitting in the corner of the garage and watching cars roll by. You would think somebody would want more, but no, I know.
Wow, God bless him. So you would say he definitely got the most out of life, and he was somebody that kind of was sounded like he was a very present man. Like he just he enjoyed life and just appreciated everything he had.
He did. He really did. Going to the racetrack, not betting, but just sitting on the wall and watching horses run and talking to horsemen. That was a good day for him.
Mm. What's one thing you want people to take away from Dick Allen's journey?
I would say I take a page out of his book. He said, "Learn to accept the silence and be strong." And he's don't quit. I mean, that was the thing he discussed about Little Rock. He wasn't going to be chased away by small threats. So I don't know. I would have to say be a little headstrong if there's something that you want to do.
For those who didn't have a chance to see Dick play, and I was very young and did have a chance to see him play, you missed something special. He was a great 5 tool baseball player. He was extremely important here in Chicago, although he wasn't here that long. He was only here 3 years, but he made a big difference to the Chicago White Sox organization, and that organization owes him big thank you and a debt of they owe him. The organization itself wouldn't be here probably without him.
Well, Dr. David Fletcher, welcome back to TSC News. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, you are the founder of the Chicago Baseball Hall of Fame. You are the co-author with John Owens of Chili Dog MVP, the definitive biography of the late, great Dick Allen. And we are here to talk about the Chicago White Sox icon, Dick Allen, who is finally, after all these years, posthumously going into the Baseball Hall of Fame. You were there with the family for that moment. Can you just describe the feeling and how it feels to finally have your friend in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, it was a wonderful feeling. That's the best way I can say. It was just a very ecstatic time, and it was sort of a culmination. I've been at this for 20 years, and so I was there in 2014 when he missed by 1 vote, lost by whisker, and just in horse racing teams, which Dick liked. And then there in 2021 when he lost again by 1 vote after he had died the year before. So a lot of anticipation for Dallas, but I had a good feeling about it. Did a lot of behind the scenes work with the voting committee. They didn't announce the committee until a few days beforehand. I did some, let's say, professional style lobbying, and a lot of the fact that we had written Chili Dog was a very big aspect in getting him in the Hall of Fame, in that was a body of work that basically documented that Dick Allen saved a charter American League franchise from leaving Chicago. And it told a story in a lot different way. And so having that credential really helped us with the voting committee. And I knew that my prediction before the vote was he was going to get 13 votes out of 16, and I was right in the money.
I love that. And it is great. Of course, from a fan's perspective, a lot of people on the outside looking in are saying, why did it take so long? I know the Baseball Hall of Fame isn't easy to get into. So with respect to media members and all that, what do you think was the hurdle for all these years, especially when he was still with us?
He wasn't the most friendliest with the media. And that was, coming back from his time in Philadelphia. He preferred to let his play on the field speak for itself. He had been on 4 different teams in 4 different years by the time he got to the White Sox. So he was kind of labeled as a bad teammate, a problem. You had Bill James calling him the worst, the cancerous player in baseball next to Rogers Hornsby, another Chicago player who played on the Cubs and was the manager of the Cubs. Just a combination of things. And he was somebody that he knew his worth. And he was ahead of his time regarding free agency. You have to remember that Dick was traded for Curt Flood. Curt Flood sat out his time when he got traded to the Phillies. A combination of factors. And plus, he didn't campaign for it. He was not somebody, he was not self-aggrandizing. He let others talk about it, but he never ever promoted himself. I knew he felt he deserved it, but it was not something that he had to have.
So, as somebody who knew him personally, would you say that he was kind of at peace with which way it would go? I'm sure he would have loved to have heard the announcement, but was he content with everything he accomplished in his baseball career?
Well, I believe so. I mean, he had a fabulous career. I mean, he would have liked to have been longer. A lot of that was because of injuries he suffered. It was, back when, medicine wasn't quite as advanced. Considering everything, I think he was very satisfied. For him, family was really one of the most important thing for him. And he felt that his peers, who were fellow Hall of Famers, knew his worth. And that I can remember talking to him about the concept of OPS plus. And he had never heard of that concept before. And I explained to him that, he was the leader for 11 years that showed, he was the dominant offensive player for 11 years in Major League Baseball against all his contemporaries. And he just said, I knew what I did in the field. That's all I needed to do. And so he had a lot of forgiveness about what happened in his life. And that was the thing I really enjoyed the most about him, was how human he was, and that it's kind of weird to meet your heroes. Actually, the real person was much better than the hero worship I had. That's what I remember the most about Dick.
And it's interesting. You mentioned forgiveness, and it refers to a lot of things he went through in his playing career, which weren't just, trades and contract negotiations, but also, unfortunately, racism. And at the time we're recording this, it is Black History Month. So, can you talk just a little bit about the racism that he had to overcome back in the day and how he kind of pushed through?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a major aspect of Dick's existence, and it had a lot to do with, I think, part of his career and what he overcame. And I think that's why I like Chicago so much, because he really got through that. He was really loved by the fans, and he brought out the minority fans there. Dick grew up in Western Pennsylvania, outside Pittsburgh and Waupun. He was a tremendous basketball player. His school won the state championship. He wasn't that big. He was only 5'10", and he just was a tremendous athlete. Could have, gone out and played college basketball. And he never had the exposure to racism outside Western Pennsylvania, where there's a lot of tolerance. And so it wasn't until the Phillies sent him down to Little Rock, Arkansas in 1963. That was when the Phillies got their AAA team was there. It was just right after the famous decision with the school, Central High School, that it banned kids, and it was just the governor there was really, very much wanted to keep segregation. And so the Phillies didn't do anything to prepare him. I mean, remember, the Phillies were the franchise that really gave Jackie Robinson a terrible reception back when he started in 47. And they were very late in getting a black baseball player. They were the last National League team to have a black baseball player. So he just wasn't prepared for Little Rock, and that was the seminal experience in his life. And so he went to Little Rock, and he was just inundated with racism. People called him the N-word, and he had all the stuff. He couldn't eat with the team, couldn't live with the team, and it was really, really a horrible experience for him. With him down there was Fergie Jenkins, Hall of Fame pitcher, who was on the air at the Arkansas Travelers with him. So he got to kind of observe Dick's reaction, and that experience just kept with him his entire life, because he had never faced racism like that. And then he actually won the fans over and was the player of the year for the Travelers, and got up to the majors in September of '63 with the Phillies. But then in Philadelphia, he experienced racism there. And so it just continued. And the Phillies didn't do what the Dodgers did for Jackie Robinson. They didn't prepare him. And so he had a lot of bitterness with that. And his son, Richard, who you had on as a guest, He would talk to me about times people would come to their house, throw rocks, garbage on their grass, and stuff like that. And so he just really experienced this whole period in the 60s. And he really was, to me, sort of a John Lewis civil rights type of person. And then he overcame this with a lot of forgiveness. And he just wanted to be the best baseball player. And he had great relationships with the Hispanic players as well as the white ball players, and was beloved by his teammates. So he had a lot to overcome. And for me, that's sort of the central experience for him. We're working on this documentary film on Dick, and we're bringing Richard to Little Rock, who's never been to Little Rock. And it was something that his dad and I talked about before he died in 2020, was going to Little Rock. So we're going to do that. We're looking to try to do that in April this year and see a Travelers game. We're trying to get Fergie to go with this. We want to film that because that was the central experience about racism for him that defined the rest of his life.
Powerful stuff. Definitely looking forward to seeing that in documentary. You would say with everything that he faced, right, in Little Rock and with the Phillies, that coming to Chicago really kind of restored his faith in baseball and maybe in some ways humanity?
It did. It did. I mean, he was a very forgiving. I mean, what a lot of people don't know, his daughter got murdered, Terry, Richard's sister, back in the early 90s. He had to deal with that loss. Um, he dealt with the way he was treated in baseball, in that he didn't have a chance to extend his career a lot because of injuries. And so I think the theme for Dick Allen for me is forgiveness. And I think that one of the big things also from the racism aspect is his famous fight with the white Frank Thomas in 1965. And they ended up having a great relationship the rest of their life. They exchanged Christmas cards. They had a lot of forgiveness. So when people bring that up, I try to correct them about what both of those persons learned from that experience, and they moved on, and it said a lot about him as a person. And I was struck by Dick's faith, and that's something you see in Richard, his son. He didn't wear it on his sleeve, but he would pray before each meal. It was his actions rather than what he said, and very, very forgiving. And so that's what I really liked about him. Here's a superstar, the highest paid baseball player, in the early 70s, outstanding talent. If he didn't have all the injuries he had, he would have been, even a better career. He just cared a lot about people, and he had such baseball intelligence.
I'm not asking you to sum up your whole book. I think people should read it, Chili Dog MVP, for sure. They should definitely read Chili Dog MVP. But just in a nutshell, how did Dick Allen save the White Sox back in 72?
Well, he saved them because they were going to move out of town. I mean, they were in '69. They were ready to go to Milwaukee. Bud Selig had bought the team, and Art Allen had a deal with him in Labor Day of '69, but he didn't talk to his brother, who was co-owner, and his brother wasn't going to let a charter American League team leave. Why go to a lesser market and lease a ballpark when you own your ballpark? And so the attendance had fallen off. They had a horrible year, just like the White Sox had a horrible year in '24. They lost 106 games. The place was empty. And so, they ended up, bringing in Roland Heeman as a player personnel director, and they brought in Chuck Tanner as a manager. They had some improvement in '71, but then made the blockbuster trade for Dick Allen, for Tommy John, for the Dodgers, and Dick came in and he just galvanized. I mean, the White Sox, had a 50-game swing in wins in just 2 years, and so they should have won the American League West. Unfortunately, Bill Melton got hurt in the offseason. He was a home run champion in '71. If he hadn't gotten hurt, they would have definitely won the American League West. It just brought the fans back, and it was, again, the Michael Jordan of before Michael Jordan. He just mesmerized, electrified baseball. It was a very South Side experience. Plus you had Nancy Faust. She invents up walk-up music because of Dick Allen. For her, that's her proudest achievement, even more than her Not IA or Take Me Out to the Ball Game. For her inventing walk-up music, and for Dick Allen to play Jesus Christ Superstar, meant the world to her.
She is rumored to be in Cooperstown for Dick Allen's induction. And I hear that you might be trying to pull some strings to possibly have her, and for those who don't know, Nancy Faust, legendary organist of the MLB, primarily with the Chicago White Sox. Could we see her play Jesus Christ Superstar in honor of Dick Allen? Or is that something that's still in the works?
Well, I mean, that's what we'd like. I mean, unfortunately, the Hall of Fame controls a lot of the ceremony and also controls what happens. I mean, to me, she needs some recognition for what she's done for baseball, and that singular accomplishment for walk-up music because of Dick, I think needs to be recognized. I mean, I know what I like to see. I know what Richard would like to see. I mean, there's a lot of things that have still not been decided yet. It certainly would put a chill in the Chicago White Sox fans who would be in attendance to hear her play it and give that recognition for Dick, because that Jesus Christ Superstar musical had come out the year before, and that was a rallying song for the White Sox fans that year. The fans came back out. The White Sox got their radio contract back. It was just a very special year. It would just really be special to have her there.
We certainly hope that happens. So that being said, is there something planned in Chicago to celebrate Dick Allen's induction?
Well, I know the White Sox are going to do a bobblehead day, I think May 3rd. So that's what I've heard so far. We're waiting to see what they're going to do. I mean, for me, it was tremendous after he got in down in Dallas to see the reaction from the fan base and to actually see like an editorial in the Chicago Tribune about him getting in the Hall of Fame and that we need another Dick Allen now for the White Sox was very special. And also there was a big story in Crane's Business Journal, which is the business journal in Chicago, about Dick. And for me as an author to get in a business journal, have your book recognized, and the story was great. It's just a fun story because he deserved it a long time ago. And again, is justice delayed is still is justice. And so I think it's even more meaningful, especially half of Japan's going to be in Cooperstown for Ichiro. So I think it's just going to be a fun experience. I'm bringing all my family. I've rented a nice house in Cooperstown, so excited about it. It'll be here before we know it.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Fletcher, thank you so much for your time. Before we let you go, what's one thing you want to leave people watching, listening to this about Dick Allen? What's one thing they should know before we hop off?
I think the most thing about Dick was how humble he was. He didn't tout his accomplishments, and he just wanted to win. He wanted to be in a winning baseball team, and he just had an incredible love for baseball and was such an extraordinary player. And probably the joy he gave me the most was watching him run the bases. He just had the most incredible way he would cut around second base and go around third and come home and score. And a lot of people have said that. So I think that's the thing I would write is, you may talk about his power, but he would have been easily, a 40-40 type of steals and a home run hitter. In fact, in 72, he stole 19 bases. So I think that says a lot about him.
Well, Dr. Fletcher, thank you so much for your time. Of course, Chili Dog MVP available now on Amazon and wherever books are sold. Anywhere else we can catch you and your book, and anything else you're involved with, Dr. Fletcher?
Well, I'm just really working on the documentary. That's the biggest thing we're really trying to put together with that. So, the museum's sort of on hold right now. But right now we work on the documentary.